The AR-2 Coyote assault rifle was released in Helldivers 2 on September 4th, 2025, almost 10 months ago in the Dust Devils Warbond. When it first dropped, it was everywhere. It quickly became one of the most used primaries in the game, and the hype made sense. Most weapons get that launch spike. They come out, everyone tries them, and then the community slowly moves on. But that never really happened to the Coyote. Since it came out, it has stayed in the top 3 most used primaries across every faction. So why is the Coyote still one of the most used primaries in Helldivers 2? And how did it survive almost 10 months of meta changes? The Helldive.live usage data is pretty clear. Since release, the Coyote has stayed in the top 3 most used primaries against every faction. Now, usage data is not everything. I did not filter for sub-factions or mission types, so this does not mean that the Coyote is the only weapon you should use in every situation. Weapon choice still depends on the mission, the enemy pool, your preferences, and how well the weapon fits into the rest of your loadout. But when a weapon stays this high for this long across every faction, that usually means something. For most players, the Coyote solves most of the problems a primary weapon can realistically solve in Helldivers 2. The usage data explains why the Coyote is worth talking about, but it does not explain why players keep trusting it. The Coyote comes from the Dust Devils Warbond, it is on page 1 and costs 35 medals. Everything starts with the base stats. It has a decent 600 RPM, a 45 round magazine, a lot of spare magazines, and medium armor penetration. Medium armor penetration is not unique among assault rifles, but it is still not the default. The Coyote gets medium penetration without feeling like a slow specialist weapon. So using the Coyote is not rocket science. It still feels like your average assault rifle. You aim at something, hold down the trigger, and most of the time it works. But there is a big thing that separates it from the other ARs. It fires incendiary rounds, which set targets on fire. That is why the weapon feels good even when you use it in the most basic way possible. You get decent range, medium armor penetration, and fire damage on top of the already okay normal projectile damage. So if you just hold down the fire button, the Coyote already feels effective. But the more you use it, the more you realize there are things to master. First, the fire damage. The Coyote can set most enemies on fire with only a few shots, so you can use it more tactically and save ammo. For example, against smaller enemies, you don't always need to shoot until they drop. You can tap fire them until they catch fire, then switch to another target while they burn down. That sounds like a small thing, but it can save you time and ammo, and you spread pressure across more enemies at the same time. The Coyote works if you use it like a normal assault rifle, but it gets better when you stop treating every target the same way. Sometimes an enemy will only need to keep burning and not more bullets. The second part is the attachment. The base weapon already feels good, but the attachment system lets you push it further. Fortunately, it has some good attachments, although it lacks customizable mags, so you can't put a drum mag on it. But you can make it more comfortable, you can change the optic and make it fit your playstyle better. And that is the reason the Coyote stayed popular for so long. It is easy to pick up, but you can master its usage to become more efficient. So another question is, why are other primaries not as consistently popular? The problem is that almost every weapon has some trade-off. Small magazine, short range, light penetration, slow reload, strange handling. Something usually gets in the way. For example, look at the Cookout. The Cookout is a shotgun, it has stagger, and it also has fire damage. Against terminids and especially against the Predator strain, it can feel amazing. But that is also where the trade-off starts. It has light penetration, so some enemies become harder to deal with, especially some automaton units. It is also still a shotgun, so distance is a limiting factor, and again, that becomes much more noticeable against bots. Then there is the per round reload. Some players like that because you can keep topping it off. For other players, it feels strange and slower than a normal magazine reload. So the Cookout is not bad, it is very strong in the right place, but it has trade-offs. The Coyote is different. It is somewhat boring, but it has almost no trade-offs. It might feel worse than a specialist weapon in a specific situation, but on average, against almost everything, it still feels like one of the safest primaries to bring. A lot of weapons are stronger when the situation fits them perfectly, but the Coyote does not need the situation to be perfect. Now let's go through each faction and see why the Coyote works everywhere. First, the Terminate. This is probably where the Coyote feels the strongest. It shreds through smaller bugs, and usually 2 or 3 shots are enough to set them on fire and let the burn damage finish them off. But it is fine against bigger units too. Of course, you are not going to take down Bile Titans or Chargers with it, but that is usually not the job of a primary weapon. It feels weaker against the Predator and Rupture strains because the Predator strain favors stagger and the Rupture strain is much easier to handle with explosives. But against the normal Terminates, the Coyote has everything. Good damage, medium penetration, and the fire damage can deal with groups. Against automatons, it is a bit weaker since some smaller boss units take reduced fire damage. But despite this, the Coyote still feels good on the bot front because of the medium penetration. And its base damage is good enough that it doesn't rely only on the burn damage. It can deal with smaller enemies, and for bigger ones you will bring the ultimatum or a red stratagem anyway. And lastly, against the Illuminate, it is great again. They usually have at most medium armor, so you can shred smaller enemies like Obtruders or Voteless, but also Overseers. Against flash mobs, it is not going to delete them instantly, but the fire damage still helps chip them down. So there are some situations where the Coyote can feel weaker, but overall it is good against every faction. Is it too strong? Should it be nerfed? No. While it is still strong, Arrow had already made indirect changes that affected how easily the Coyote sets some targets on fire. I don't think the Coyote is broken. I think a lot of other primaries are underperforming. The solution would be to buff some other underperforming primaries. And like I said earlier, there are better options for some sub-factions and situations anyway. If Arrow had nerfed this rifle further, I think it would just push it into the same meh category as a lot of other ARs. The Coyote stayed near the top for this long because it does almost everything a primary weapon should do well enough. The Coyote is not the most exciting primary and it is not the first in every category, but it is easy to use, you can learn to use it more efficiently, and it has solid stats. And I think the design is also part of the appeal. It is one of the most basic weapon type a shooter can have. It looks a bit like an AK-47 and it functions like a basic assault rifle. I think that makes it very easy to understand and very easy to like. And I think this is the bigger lesson with the Coyote. In Helldivers 2, a primary weapon does not need to solve the whole mission. This is what support weapons, stratagems and teammates are for, but a good primary should make the normal parts of the mission feel stable, clearing smaller enemies, handling targets, saving ammo where possible, and not forcing the rest of the build to compensate for it too much. The Coyote does that very well. It does not carry the entire loadout, but it makes the loadout easier to play. So that is why the Coyote stayed near the top of the usage leaderboards for almost 10 months in Helldivers 2. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, subscribe and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to support the channel extra, you can also join as a member. There are 2 tiers, and if you want your name to appear on the support wall at the end of my videos, join the higher tier. Thanks for watching.